Duke baseball season is off to the races. How are the Blue Devils doing so far this season? And a couple of other topics across the world of Duke athletics. A really fun conversation with Chris Edwards of the Blue Devil Network coming up on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Friday, April 21st, 2023. We hope that everyone is doing incredibly well. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you follow and subscribe to our Locked On Blue Devils podcast for free, available wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to each and every episode of this fine program. You can watch us each and every day on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button. Your support means the absolute world to us. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils, and you can find me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. On today's show, very thrilled to welcome in my good pal Chris Edwards, the radio play-by-play voice of Duke women's basketball and baseball, kind enough to be back with us. Chris, it's been a long time since we've gotten a chance to see you. I hope you're doing well, my friend.
Always, JJ. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. We've got a lot to catch up on. I want to talk about this baseball season thus far, a couple of other topics in the world of Duke athletics as well. So simply put, where are we at, Chris? Here we are, April winding down. What can you tell us about this Duke baseball season so far?
Yeah, JJ, the weather is heating up and so are the Blue Devils, which is what usually happens this time of year, right? I think the Blue Devils over the last 11 years under Chris Pollard have now won 90 games in the month of April. They're 8-2 or 9-2, whatever it is this April. And they're starting to play some really good baseball, both offensively and on the mound. The Blue Devils are getting contributions up and down the lineup. We've talked about it, I think, coming into the season. This was going to be a Duke team that was better than the team that missed the ACC and the NCAA tournament last year. It's an older group, and you've got some younger guys that maybe you didn't expect to be in the mix that have really bought in and they've performed maybe over expectations. I don't know that the coaching staff would say that, but I think if you're on the outside looking in and you've got some names where you don't really recognize, like an Andrew Fisher, and you're like, I don't know about this guy as a true freshman, and all he's done is hit 10 home runs this year. He set the single season freshman record for home runs. I mean, he's hitting your two-hole as a freshman in the ACC. That's pretty impressive. Transfer Jay Bashirs has been dynamite for the Blue Devils. I think he's up to 8 or 9 home runs now. Team leader in RBI. Alex Mooney sets the table at the top of the order. But then you've got some of those veterans like Luke Storm and Alex Stone in the middle of the order that are starting to get things going. They're starting to heat up. I was looking at it earlier. Stone's on a 10-game hitting streak heading into this weekend series against Louisville. Haven't even talked about Gio DiGiacomo, the LSU transfer, who's playing a really high-level center field. And it doesn't matter if he bats 6th, 7th, 8th in the order, 9th. He's finding a way to turn the lineup over to get on base. And then the Blue Devils are doing it on the mound, too. You've got James Talon, another freshman at the back end of the game. I think he's up to like 8 or 9 saves right now. Fran O'Shell has taken a huge jump for Duke this year. He was a guy that last year threw some in the midweek, and now O'Shell's been up to 96, 97 as a sophomore. You've got Aiden Weaver, who's a freshman. He's been up to 98 this year with the fastball. I mean, the Blue Devils have just figured it out, and they're using that Tampa Bay Rays style of pitching, or they're using maybe an opener. So you'll see a guy start and go 1, maybe 2 times through the order and then just hand the ball off to the next guy, right? Just keep the line moving. And they've got guys like Talon that we mentioned, Adam Boucher at the back end of the game. O'Shell's been great. And then at the start of the game, you're starting to see some guys kind of develop. Alex Gow has been really good. Ryan Higgins had a great start last Sunday against Boston College. 5 innings at BC, series on the line. He goes out, throws 5 shutout innings, allows just 1 hit, faces 1 man over the minimum. So you like where this team is at. Now, look, it's going to get harder. It doesn't get any easier, but that's life in the ACC, right? So the Blue Devils have Louisville this weekend at the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. Then they go to Virginia, 2 of the best teams in the ACC this year. Then you get the exam break, a chance to regroup, take a deep breath, and then you close with Georgia Tech at home and Miami on the road. We'll find out about the Blue Devils over the next couple of weeks, but I like where this club is at.
It's fun to watch, and you're right. It is a time of year where things are heating up. Crazy to think about that stat with what Duke has been able to do in the month of April. Keep in mind, of course, for folks that aren't as customary with college baseball, not like major leagues, right, where you're playing 30 games a month. You're not playing every single day. You've got these midweek series, midweek games, and then a couple of weekend series there in the conference. So impressive that Coach Pollard has been able to put all of that together. I want to hear a little bit more, though, about the expectations, Chris, going into the year, because you're right. Last year was a season for Duke baseball where they didn't live up to postseason expectations following a year in which they did, right? In a way, it feels like just yesterday we did see a Duke baseball team knock off NC State to win the ACC championship. That wasn't the case. So take me back to the first few weeks of February when this 2023 baseball season is starting. What are the dreams and aspirations? What is realistic for this club at that point of year?
Yeah, I think we all kind of thought, I think once the season started, this team could be here in this position where they're at, right? I mean, you talk to people around the program in the preseason, and they were high. There were expectations, but there's always expectations with this program. And you mentioned the 2021 ACC title, but keep in mind, this is a program that was a win away from going to Omaha in 2018 and 2019. Now, I realize 2019 was, 5 years ago, and COVID sort of stunted some of that, right? And that 2020 team was going to be really, really good, and then was going to get even better. It was a step back last year, certainly. And then I think if you ask Coach Pollard and you ask people who were involved in the program last year, you could say that the culture took a hit. And Coach is big on process and big on culture, and you can see that there was a step back with the culture last year. So fast forward to this year, Duke did a lot of things to work on the culture during the preseason, during the offseason, and that's paid dividends. We've got some staff additions this year with the addition of Brady Kirkpatrick as the pitching coach, Eric Tyler's running the offense, Ty Blankmeyer is the recruiting coordinator, and those guys, a younger group of guys, have really brought this fresh energy to the club. I mean, they don't take themselves too seriously. They're able to relate to the players. They're joking around. It's just been a really fun group to be around. And I think heading into the season, I thought, this team could be 10 or 15 wins better than the team last year. And they won, 22, 23 games, something like that. And they won 5 games over top 15 teams a season ago. Fast forward to this year, Blue Devils are already exceeded their win total from a year ago. I think there's a legit path to get to 35, 36 wins for the Blue Devils. And I think the big reason why is you've got some of these guys who are back that have really bought in to making sure the culture is better. You've got these younger guys that are infusing some new energy. And this is just a fun group to be around, and they're playing at a really high level.
We're talking about the Duke baseball season thus far, what to expect in the coming weeks as we get closer to postseason time, expectations, and more. We're going to take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. We talk about Built Bar all the time, and for good reason. The number one protein bar out there. I wouldn't endorse any other product. It's just that good. And something exciting is coming to Built.com tomorrow. That's right, on Saturday, April 22nd. I don't have all the details yet, but the excitement is incredibly real, and it's something that you don't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they've got the most incredible protein bars in the world. All bars covered in 100% real chocolate, amazing flavor drops that remain healthy for you. So mark your calendars right now. Tomorrow, go to Built.com to see the first and to be one of the first to discover what the hype is all about with the brand new flavor being released. Also, make sure you use promo code LOCKEDON15, LOCKEDON15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Built Bar is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving forward here on today's episode of the program, JJ Jackson alongside the radio play-by-play voice of Duke baseball, Chris Edwards. Chris, talking about this season thus far and talking about the players that came back for another year of baseball there in the middle of the order. But you mentioned a couple of standout youngsters on this club as well. What has that the youthful presence of Fisher in the lineup and names like that done for the offense for Duke?
Yeah, we talked about it. I talked about it earlier this year. You've got these older guys, some of the transfers, the graduate transfers, some of the older guys that are back. And this might be their last chance to go around in a college baseball environment, right? And then you've got these young guys, these freshmen, who you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you're not supposed to be good, right? And so sometimes you can blend that together. You got these guys that are like, okay, this is my last chance. And then you've got these other guys that are young and dumb, for lack of a better expression, right? And sometimes it comes together and works perfectly. And that's kind of been what it has been for the Blue Devils this year. Now, I'm probably understating it a little bit because these guys are really, really talented, right? You've got Fisher, who's hit 10 home runs, who can hit for power. You can hit for average. You've got talent at the back end of the game. You've got Andrew Healy starting on Tuesday. I mean, you can just continue to go down the line and talk about these impressive freshmen. And Coach and I talk about it all the time. Like, we take these guys for granted. Like, you just expect them to go out and do it because they've done it all year. And when they don't do it, whatever it is, hit a home run, get a big strikeout, you're a little surprised. And you're like Healy walked a guy on Tuesday night against William and Mary. It was his second walk of the year. He had thrown 26 innings and he walked 2 guys.
Wow.
And you're like, he walked a guy? Like, come on. Like, but that's how this is going for this team right now. Like, Fisher goes 0 for 4. He gets on base twice with a couple of walks. He didn't hit a home run. Like, that's just kind of where it's at with this team right now. And it's so much fun to watch. And these guys are so much fun to be around. And it's just a lot of fun to have a front row seat and watch this program continue to do what it seems to do every single year. And that's get hot late in the year and make a charge to the postseason.
Yeah, and then you talk about building year after year after year, right? Who knows what this postseason will hold for Duke, but knowing that now you've got a freshman class that still has years of eligibility remaining, right? To remind folks, baseball is a sport that you can't just go off to the draft after a season. You got to remain committed to your program in school. So that's definitely a positive building block for Coach Pollard and his staff in the years to come, right?
Absolutely. And this is a program that's got a track record of getting some really good guys. I mean, think about the guys that have already turned out of this program that are deep in minor league careers, right? Like Matt Mervis is a call away, a heartbeat away from the big leagues. Bryce Jarvis doing great things in AA with the Diamondbacks. You've got guys like Loper Fido who were so good here. Marcus Johnson's off to a great start in his professional career. 2 starts, hasn't allowed a run yet in 2 starts. So, I mean, these are guys that are good while they're here in college, right? But then they're prepared for pro ball. Think about this, like guys like Jarvis, guys like Mervis, those guys were either not drafted out of high school or they were drafted really, really late. Everybody that's come to this program, sans maybe Mooney, we'll see what happens with Alex in the draft this year, next year, whatever. But for the most part, these guys have either been drafted really late or have not been drafted. They come to school and they improve their draft stock and they become top 10, top 12 rounders. And that speaks to the job that Chris Pollard and his staff have done year in and year out of developing talent. Like, you develop at Duke. It's not just coming here for a year or two and then you move on, right? No, coming to Duke, you develop, and Coach talks about it all the time. It's a 40-year decision to come to Duke because you're not just here for 4 years. I mean, this Duke degree, you're going to come to Duke, you're going to get a Duke degree, you're going to go on and have a great career either in professional baseball or either outside of pro ball, and it's all because of Duke and this commitment you make to this program.
Yeah, and then not even to mention some of the major league names out there, of course, Marcus Stroman being the headline name of them, but what that can do for your program and the recruiting pitches and that sort of thing, tons of reason to be excited. So from a baseball perspective then, you mentioned Duke turning the corner, heating up, right time of year. What gives you confidence, Chris, that this team can kind of string together a good run?
Yeah, I think it's all the things we talked about. I mean, the model of using the opener, right? And you're not going to have a guy go out there and throw 112 pitches. That's just not the way this staff is designed this year. But you've got enough guys that are fresh for the stretch run. You've got a really good back end of the bullpen. There's a lot of depth. And this is a team that's still cultivating depth from a pitching standpoint. I think that's the most encouraging thing. Jimmy Romano gave Duke a great outing on Tuesday night against William and Mary. Romano's continued to impress out of the bullpen. So that's another chess piece for Coach Pollard and his staff to use. You've got guys that are swinging it well. I mean, Cole Hebel's come off the bench and spelled some Blue Devils at times this year and had some really quality at-bats. Had a 3-hit day against William and Mary on Tuesday. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are contributing to this team. It's not just the 4 or 5 guys that we mentioned. I mean, up and down the order, I was texting with somebody earlier this week that on any given night, it could be 7 different guys that give you the big base hit to win the game. This is a team that's used to playing in these low-scoring, grinded-out kind of ball games. They tend to get better as the year goes along. I'm just really excited about this team. I think this is a team that's built for another deep postseason run. Now, listen, some of it is dependent on the matchups, right? And we've talked about it already. It's going to get harder for Duke.
Right.
With Louisville, with Virginia, with Georgia Tech, with Miami. They're going to make the ACC tournament. I'm very confident they will be in Durham for the conference tournament. I'm confident they're going to be in a regional. But all of that is dependent on the matchups that you get, right? We remember 2019, Duke was not a very good offensive team that year. They go to this Morgantown regional with Fordham, West Virginia, and Texas A&M. And of the 4 teams, Duke's probably the best offensive team. So it was a great matchup. Duke sweeps that regional. They're a win away from Omaha. You go back to 2018, that was a veteran group that figured out a way to get it done out of the losers bracket. So as the old expression goes, there's more than one way to win a ball game, right, or win a regional. So it's all dependent on the matchups. But I'm really encouraged by the depth this team has, both positionally and on the mound. They're a solid defensive club. This is just a traditional, really solid college baseball team that Chris Pollard's built.
And we can listen to all of your calls there for Duke Baseball as the play-by-play radio voice for the Duke Blue Devils program. Let me ask you this then, as we heat up, the job itself, what's your ask to do this time of year? What do you love the most about the job?
Just being around the guys, just calling the games. I mean, I think now for me, the crossover season has ended. I mean, you're diving into the baseball. It's baseball every single day, really. And it's just nice to be around the guys and see the guys and hanging around the cage and talking. I love to find the stories because you got to try and find ways to keep it fresh. But just showing up at the ballpark every day, seeing everybody's face. I mean, you spend more time with these people than you do with your own family. And Coach talks about it all the time. The Duke baseball family is real. We were in Boston a couple of weeks ago, had a chance to visit with a couple of former team captains and Max Miller and Kenny Taylor. And now that you've been around for a while, like I'm old, like I'm the old guy. This is my 11th year with this program. And so you see these guys that are freshmen, sophomores, juniors that are on the team now, but you also have that connection to guys that were here 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's the cool part too, is to be able to connect these generations now, right? It's been a generation of Duke baseball players and just to be privileged, JJ, really, and it's a humbling thing to have your voice associated with these moments. And you think back to all these things that Duke has done, the Jarvis perfect game, the 2 regional championships, the ACC title, like Chris Edwards' voice, for better or worse, probably for worse in a lot of cases.
No.
But that's just really cool. It's really humbling. And the chance to be around these guys every day is something special.
I got to ask you, though, as a play-by-play broadcaster and then as someone who certainly does love the game of baseball in the way in which you do, Chris, baseball has such a special place in my heart as well. It's just been a sport that has always been kind of in the background of everyone's lives as we get into the summer season and that sort of thing. So much focus at the major league level this year on pace of play, right? I mean, the average duration of a game, it is nuts and insane to think about the changes that are in place and the positive impact that is having. When you look at the college game, your job in particular, I know these are discussions that happen all the time. How do you feel about the pace of play and how important is it to kind of speed that up from what you've been doing?
Well, you know, we've gone to the pitch clock this year in the ACC, and all of college baseball has now gone to this 20-second pitch timer. And I will be the first to admit that I'm probably a dinosaur and I'm old school in a lot of the ways I think about the game. I don't think the game was broken. I think the game is fine. I think the game will find ways to correct itself. That being said, there was an issue with the pace of play, like college baseball taking 3.5 hours, just ridiculous and absurd. And if we're trying to grow the sport, that's not the way to do it. So the pitch timer has been phenomenal. I love the pitch clock, and I didn't think I would, but I was like, this is great. We played a 7-0 game on Tuesday night in 2 hours and 22 minutes. We've played 14-2 games in less than 3 hours this year. Like, it's great. And now everyone's used to it. Everyone knows the rules. We haven't had very many pitch clock issues or violations this year. We had a few early, but I think everyone has kind of settled into it. I think the one thing now, if you're wanting me to get on my soapbox, and I will gladly get on my soapbox about this, is the instant replay, is the reviews. And look, there's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of wins at stake. We have a lot at stake in these games, and we have the technology to get the calls right. I think we should get the calls right. Now, I think the way the ACC and a lot of other power leagues go about doing this replay is absurd. I think there's no reason for us not to have some sort of centralized replay like they do in other leagues. You have an umpiring crew. It can be 1 umpire, 2 umpires at the conference office, whatever. In league play, you don't have to do centralized replay for non-conference games. Let's be fair about that. But in league play, you can have some sort of centralized replay where there's an umpire back at the conference headquarters that's not involved in the call. Because let's say you, JJ, are the crew chief, and you make a call at first base, you call the guy out, and you're confident the guy is out. Well, you go back as the crew chief for the replay. Well, now there's an appearance of bias there because you don't want to overturn yourself. I'm not saying that these guys are biased. They're upstanding guys. They're to administer the rules and uphold the rules of the game. But by you going back there, that's the appearance of bias now. And also, me as a fan, why do I want to pay all my money, my hard-earned money, to come out to the ballpark, watch these guys go into a tunnel for 5 minutes and look at a video screen? No one wants to do that.
Right.
We've got to have a better system. We can't have a 5-minute review that are costing people games. If you can't tell in 2 minutes, let's move on. Call stands, right? But if we had a centralized replay, or there's somebody back at the conference office looking at it, you take the appearance of bias out of it. It's quick. You give the umpire a microphone. He tells everybody in the stands, call stands, overturned, let's move on. That is the one thing where I think college baseball is really lacking right now, is to find a way to speed up the replay process. Everything else about the game is great. You can still shift. I have no issues with the shift. Don't ban the shift. You know what? You know what the best way to beat the shift is? Hit the ball the other way. It ain't hard, right? So I think there's a lot of good things with college baseball. It's just the replay that gets stuck in my crawl, and I think we can find a better way to speed that part up.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly there with you. And as a broadcaster myself, a lot of time in the SEC, as it's well known, and have gotten to a point where we do see a lot of those centralized replay reviews. It is an odd look at first, Chris. I'm not going to lie to you. When you've got the umpire standing there and he's trying to listen in to what the call is being made there in Birmingham, but it has just sped it up so much quicker to kind of get that call in, and it does so much.
And if we're so concerned about pace of play, well, replay is the biggest thing that's hindering pace of play right now. It's not guys stepping in and out of the box. It's not between innings. I mean, they're given 90 seconds between innings. Like, we're moving this thing along, right?
Yeah.
So if we're so concerned about pace of play, why are we not addressing the biggest thing that slows down pace of play? And that's the reviews.
Yep, I'm right there with you. All right, let's touch on a couple of more things before we get you out of here.
Soapbox over.
Yeah, exactly. We'll move on. Chris Edwards here with us on Locked On Blue Devils. I do want to talk a little hoops with you. So we'll get to the men's team in just a moment, but you're also the play-by-play guy for Duke women's basketball. Tons and tons of excitement for Carol Lawson and what she's been able to do with her program this past season. Had so many incredible moments to listen to you on the call for. A lot of big wins for the squad. What's been happening over the last few weeks? We mentioned transfer portal a little bit earlier. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about these days. What can you tell us about Coach Lawson and her program?
Yeah, not going to get too much into the transfer portal stuff. That's well beyond my domain. And I enjoy calling the games, and whoever's on the roster, I'm going to talk about who's there and
no doubt
for the Blue Devils. So I'm not interested in all the transfer portal stuff. We're a long way away from November and the start of the season. But you're right. Really great year for the squad last year. I mean, think about it. You go into the regular season finale with a chance to win the ACC regular season. I don't think anybody projected that. In fact, I know they didn't. They picked Duke 7th in the league in the preseason. Duke finishes 2nd. They make the run there to the semifinals in Greensboro and ran up against a buzzsaw. Like Virginia Tech late in the season was clearly the best team in the league. They got to the Final Four. Kenny Brooks did a great job with that squad. But I make this comparison now with women's basketball the same as I did with baseball in 2016. Duke got to a regional in baseball in 2016, went 2-0 in Columbia, then went back to a regional in 2018, won the regional, whatever. So it's like the same analogy, because as a person, when you're a baby, you've got to learn to crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run. Kind of the same thing, I think, with Coach Lawson building this program. Like, Duke had some success her first full year. Remember, didn't play that first year because of some COVID concerns. Then really the first full year was the next year. Duke made a nice little run there, got deep into the ACC tournament. Then last year found a way to get into the semifinals of the conference tournament, a win away from an ACC tournament, ACC regular season championship, went away from going to the Sweet 16. They hosted the first and second rounds. It's the next step in the progression, right? And now you look at this club that has a top 5 nationally recruiting class coming in, highlighted by Jaden Donovan. Like, this is a program that's going to continue to be in the top 4 or 5 of the ACC every single year. I think the Blue Devils are going to be in contention to host the first and second rounds at Cameron every year. And what Kara's building is just really, really special. And hopefully people will get behind it. They'll see it. I mean, that club was so much fun to watch last year. They played just tenacious defense. They really got after it. And I think you realize that probably were some moments where you could have scored a little bit more, but just the way that club played defense on a night in, night out basis, and they played defense for 40 minutes, JJ. Like, it was intense and impressive, and it's just really fun to watch what she's building.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the future. Definitely excited for the talented recruiting class coming in. We saw a lot of big moments. I know there are a couple of players in Duke women's basketball this past season that are now starting their professional careers and opportunities at that basket. Same thing with baseball, right? The more you can get players drafted at the WNBA level, there are so many great former Duke women's basketball players that had long professional careers that just does so much for your program.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a few that are going on to be really good at the WNBA level, and there's more that are going to come. So yeah, it's a good thing. It's all a big cycle, right? If you're a fan of women's basketball, this is the program that you need to be following because they're doing some really big things.
On the men's side, we saw a really fun first year of John Shire, culminating, of course, with the ACC Tournament Championship. And then this offseason has started, and Duke basketball has gotten 3 massive decisions, with Proctor, Mitchell, and Filipowski all deciding to return for their sophomore seasons. We're still very much so in a one-and-done era of college basketball with the rule that is in place. But, I mean, it's got to be massive for John Shire's program, knowing that unlike a season ago when he only had 2 scholarship players that had previously worn that Duke jersey before, he's going to have several more coming back for another season and a top recruiting class coming in.
Yeah, we talk about being old in college basketball and how older teams win, right? Well, I think right now, old is like a bunch of sophomores. And that's kind of what it feels like, isn't it?
You're right.
You've got 3 sophomores. You're old. Kind of the way it is in this era with the portal and the NIL and the one and done and everything. So I think that's huge. I mean, I think Coach Shire said it best at the banquet. So the video I saw on social media a couple of days ago, Duke basketball is not going anywhere. And it's not. And the ACC Tournament Championship and the run there in the postseason, a lot to be excited about in Durham, and hopefully people continue to get behind Coach Shire and his program.
It's going to be a lot of fun, that's for sure. And we'll certainly be following along and continuing to listen to Duke baseball, women's basketball, and following all of your work on social media as well. Give me one more plug. How can we listen to the rest of this Duke baseball season, Chris?
Yeah, easiest way, JJ, is on the Varsity Network app. It's a free download. Just download the Varsity Network app, search for Duke baseball. You can listen to all of our broadcasts of football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball. All of our coaches' shows are there too. It's the easiest way to listen. Free download, doesn't cost you anything. Just put your headphones in and your AirPods or whatever, and we'll have you on the radio for the rest of the year.
Love that. Chris, thanks so much for the time today. We'll talk again soon, okay?
JJ, always great to be with you. Thanks.
All right, that's my pal Chris Edwards from Blue Devil Network joining us here on the program today. Duke baseball coming up this weekend. Really exciting series for the Blue Devils, and we'll be sure to follow along and listen to Chris's work. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to the program. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.